Hello and welcome back. And today, before I start the video about the brand new ASUS device, I wanted to take a moment of your time and just maybe you can help me with something, right? I talk about a lot of brands here on the channel, from network attached storage to hardware brands with hard drives, and then we talk about routers and switches and God knows what all the way through the year. But one of the brands that I talk about, I would say slightly less than the others in network attached storage, is of course DriveStor. I do talk about them. I probably make a video about them at least once or twice a month as it is, but they by no means hold the market share when it comes to this channel. Now, one of the reasons for that is generally the videos on this channel exist because you guys make the requests for the comparisons that you want to see, or because the devices that you guys are asking about are the ones that I contact the brands and ask them to send me a unit. So this is a brand, DriveStor, that I talk about less on the channel, and I want to talk about them more, but I need to know that you guys want to hear about them. I want to hear your positive experiences, I want to hear your negative experiences, and ultimately, I want to hear what you guys have to say about this brand. So, if you have used an DriveStor before, or you're currently using one now, let us know about it in the comments so we can open the discussion and find out more about this brand. Because a number of you get sick and tired of hearing about the same 2 or 3 brands over and over again, and you want to hear more about the others, but a few people are less keen to make the jump onto the ship. So with that out of the way, please put your stories in the comments, and otherwise, let's get this review started. Hello and welcome back. That was a long old intro, wasn't it? Today we're going to talk about the brand new DriveStor Pro from DriveStor. This is their new affordable 4-bay solution. It takes advantage of a popular ARM 64-bit processor that we've been talking about for a year or so, and it's a follow-up to its previous generations in that family. It brings a lot of more modern hardware to the field, at least from DriveStor, in their more later releases, something that at this affordable level almost no other brand has done. It has to have been said that a lot of the hardware attributes in this are not exactly new. We've definitely seen them both from their brand and others, but as an affordable NAS 4-bay goes, this has actually got quite a lot going for it. In today's video, we're going to talk predominantly about the hardware. I've got a full software review coming because we will be hardware reviewing the 2-bay as well. So rather than make you guys have to go through that twice, today's video is just about the hardware, though of course we're going to mention the software, and later on we're going to do a second video in the next week or so where we predominantly look at the software. ADM version 4, the new version that was released recently. We're going to go into some of the bits and bobs of that, and hopefully some follow-up stuff where we look at Plex Media Server on this and a few container and backup things. But let's talk about this 4-bay. Right, the DriveStor Pro, there is actually 2 different versions of this system. There's a Pro and a non-Pro. Now, there are some differences between them in terms of memory, but I think one of the most attractive reasons about the Pro is it arrives with 3 years of warranty. Now, I know it seems like a bit of a downer to start any video talking about warranty, because it's like screaming, wait, these things break. But it's not as simple as that. Any device we buy these days, from the mobile phone in our pocket to the home console, to the computer, to the laptop, to the NAS, arrives with a warranty. And a lot of people don't really look into warranties. They really don't. They buy a thing and go, well, if it breaks, the manufacturer backed me up. Have a look at the hardware warranty of most of the devices in your home, the TVs, the phones, whatever. The majority of devices these days arrive with 1 year warranty. That's a joke, in my opinion. But in NAS, we very rarely see a NAS with 1 year warranty, with the majority of them coming with 2. The reason I raise it right now is because this device, with its more affordable price point and its more affordable architecture, arrives with 3 years of warranty, which is more than every other brand has provided with a device at this hardware level. QNAP and Synology have released their own version of this kind of NAS that have got the same CPU, similar memory, definitely not the same network connectivity, and they release it with 2 years warranty. This is one of the few out there that's got 3, which is generally a good sign from the brand that they're prepared to cover you long term. Now, this device arrives with, as mentioned, ADM, but it doesn't have the BTRFS support, and it's something I find a little surprising, because I know it has that arguably more modest processor, but I will say that that CPU and the 2 gig of memory it arrives with, a brand like Synology has managed to get BTRFS running on this system. So I'm a little surprised at the specs detailed EXT4. But let's have a look at what we get for our money. Let's open this box up. So inside, if we open it up, obviously we have the external packaging there. I should have highlighted. Fairly standard stuff. Again, we have unboxed Acer stores on this channel before, the most recent one being the Locker Store series. So again, nice, appealing, you know, it's quite drawn to the eye, it's quite straightforward, tells you everything about it on a hardware software level, kind of mentions a lot of stuff about transcoding, some of the business features. If we have a look inside, we've got our box of accessories. Inside we find a UK mains lead there and an external power brick. This is the 4-bay model, so this arrives with a 90-watt external power brick. I know there's mixed feelings about external power bricks generally. A lot of people think an external power brick is just asking for the thing to be pulled out. Me personally, an external power brick for me is just easier to replace than on a desktop level, particularly at this kind of modest scale. I quite like that, and of course that's covered by that warranty. We have a Cat 5e cable. Normally at this juncture I would complain about companies not using Cat 6, but given this is not a 10G box, that's absolutely fine by me. We also have screws for the installation of 2.5-inch media. This does support 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch media, with the 3.5-inch being click and load. We'll cover that in a bit. And we've got information on our warranty and a quick start installation guide. Move that over there. After that, and I'm trying not to dead arm myself on the table, we've got some foam. Fairly modest foam there, I'll be honest. I generally do talk about brands, how they package these things externally. A lot of the time when we get these things, they've travelled a lot around the world, so I kind of expect a little bit more rigidity than this in the external packaging, because, you know, when these things, you know, have shock damage or motion damage in transit, a lot of the damage you don't see for the first few months or years of the system's life, but it's there. And that's slightly less packaging than I would have liked on a particularly a 4-bay model. I know this arrives unpopulated, and a lot of people might be thinking I'm being incredibly pedantic about this, but genuinely I've seen NASs that have arrived empty chassis that have got, you know, packaging thicker than this that have suffered shock damage. So again, it's never going to protect from a forklift truck arm, I grant you, but nevertheless I kind of would have liked to have seen slightly better packaging than that. There's nothing else inside. Let's have a look. So if we open this up, have a look. Again, this is a chassis we've seen before. We have seen the chassis utilised in the AS40 10GBE series, and we've seen it in the Nimbus Store series that came later on. I am going to have nothing but pleasure by removing this. This is going to make a noise on camera, I'm sorry. Got rid of that. And there we have the nice shiny chassis. I do quite like the kind of nice coppery writing there at the top. You'll have to forgive the shine there on camera. It's a very nice chassis, I've got to say. If we move that there for camera, maybe get the thumbnail sorted. There we go, that was easy. So again, it's a 4-bay chassis there. The front panel easily removes to reveal our 4 SATA bays there. And I think this is a nice moment to just talk a little bit more about the hardware inside this device. So first and foremost, when we think about the internals of this device, the CPU is the Realtek, it's the RTD1296. That's a quad-core 1.4 GHz 64-bit ARM processor. The key bit there is 64-bit, because as we've talked about previously on the channel, ARM processors are generally less good. That's a nice way to put it, maybe a less grammatical way than I'd like. ARM-based processors generally can't really compete in terms of graphical manipulation and virtualization and just general file handling and throughput against the likes of x86 processors like Intel's. But 64-bit variants are able to use compressed lines of code delivered to the CPU, and ultimately it allows them to do things that previously ARM processors just simply couldn't do. And one of the things that CPU can do, of course, is 4K transcoding. The transcoding of H.265, that's HEVC 10-bit media, which is something I'm really looking forward to seeing the system do. Whether that translates into Plex, I'm less certain, but I'm sure the native applications would be able to take care of that quite easily. That CPU also opens the door to DDR4 memory. The system arrives with 2 gig, as mentioned, of DDR4 memory as standard. That DDR4 memory can't be upgraded. It's 2400 megahertz, so it's still a good step up from its predecessor. which had DDR3, I think 1600 megahertz. It doesn't have M2 or NVMe upgradability. This system does do a very good job, I think, of capitalizing on the CPU lanes that are available to it. There's only the single network interface port, for example, that we'll talk about in a moment. When we talk about the storage, this 4-bay doesn't have to be fully populated with 4 drives. You can get away with just 1 if you want, but that seems needlessly risky to me and a bit of a waste of money on a RAID 5 equipped box like this. I would go for at least 2, and then you can expand that storage later on. The bays themselves are SATA, so if we remove a tray, again, plastic trays, they're quite rigid. Fair play to them for that. They're not spring-loaded or anything, and the trays aren't lockable. To install a drive, we remove one clip, remove the other clip, grab a drive. I've got a Seagate Iron Wolf here. This system does support Seagate Iron Wolf, WD Red, Toshiba N300s, all of those NAS-based drives, up to about 16 and 18 TB at the current maximums. And of course 20 TB drives arriving in EAMR and HAMR very, very soon. So again, you've got a huge amount of storage capabilities in here, and it's that straightforward to install a drive. The tray holds that drive beautifully, nice and easily, and we can slot that directly inside. There we go, the drive's installed. You can do that 4 times, boom, you're ready for your RAID 5. I mentioned RAID 5, it supports RAID 5, RAID 6, of course, so 1 and 2 disk fail safes there. And of course, there's your RAID 0 and your RAID 1s, but at this level, I'd maybe think a little higher. If we remove the trays, do that one there, remove those trays, trying to remove them en masse, probably not, they're not going to be budging in there too quickly. And if we have a look inside, we can see a nice, clean, well-ventilated chassis all the way through. You can see there those nice SATA ports there. There's no like separate data and power and stuff like that inside. The system features USB ports throughout that have a multitude of abilities. So we've got some USB. We've got a USB port there on the front, which has a one-touch copy button there, something I'm always going to be a fan of. Anyone that's ever watched me on this channel will know that. Further USB ports there on the rear. I will highlight they are USB 3.2 Gen 1, which again I know the USB naming convention has gone kind of crazy recently, but that means that each one of those is a 5 gigabit connection. So again, external storage drives. This isn't a KVM equipped box, so you can forget about keyboard, video, mouse kind of setups. Mainly look at storage, but of course ASUS have their own 4-bay expansion chassis, and this device with all 3 of its ports does support connection of all of each one of those ports having a 4-bay expansion, which means this 4-bay can be bolstered up to a potential 16 bays of storage. Now, I query whether you would do that on a Realtek ARM processor NAS with 2 gig of memory. I think definitely expanding, but whether you would get the throughput and handling of a RAID using those expansions with this kind of architecture, particularly when the external throughput of this device is definitely not going to be able to give you that kind of storage delivery. It's great for archiving, but perhaps that may be over-egging the pudding to go up to 16 bays of storage. Still nice to have that kind of level of access, and of course those expansions aren't just for expanding your storage. They can be used for parallel storage, archiving, backups and more. On the front, we have got multiple LED lights possible there on the front of the chassis, and a power button there at the top. It's all quite nice and clear. Sidewise, not a vast amount of ventilation on either side. I've always been a fan of this chassis. I've got to say I really like that effect. I've mentioned it before. The base of the system's got a little bit more storage there, as you can see. Not storage, ventilation for each of those drives there. And if we look at the rear of the chassis, the first thing that strikes you is that big old cooling fan there. The RPM of that fan can be adjusted on the fly, so you can go ahead and increase or decrease manually, but I would definitely leave that as a manual switch if I was you. On the rear, not a vast number of ports. Because of it only being a single LAN device, and we've already discussed the USBs, the only thing really to talk about is this little red port here, and that's because this system supports 2.5 GBE. That's 2.5 gigabit Ethernet over copper. And again, we're seeing more and more devices arrive on the scene, from PCs that have by default a 2.5 GBE port arriving at the same price as one. We're seeing more routers arrive with 2.5 GBE. We're seeing more network switch providers arrive with 2.5 GBE solutions. And of course, you've got auto negotiation on larger switches that may have a 10 GBE port or multiple 10 GBE port that, thanks to auto negotiation, can go down to 5 and to 2.5 GBE. So integrating 2.5 GB into a network environment is not as out there as it used to be. And the fact that this arrives with 2.5 GBE at a 1 GBE price, much like the Nimbus Store and the Lock Store did before it, is very, very appealing to me. And again, so far the things that have appealed to me are that network port, and certainly that 3-year warranty and expandability is definitely something to write home about. Now, obviously, an external 2.5 GBE port on this, even if it is like a 4-bay and you've got a decent little ARM 64-bit CPU relative to it, 2.5 GBE is still not wide enough as bandwidth to facilitate that much storage. So even though the architecture of this device is quite similar to the ASUS AS40 that came before it, that external port, you're not really going to realistically see more than 200 megabytes per second upload and download. Now, of course, you can exceed that because technically 2.5 GBE isn't exactly 250 megs, and indeed, I think the upload downloads were reported at 216 megs to 270 odd megs. But what I will say is, of course, trying to run those simultaneously, yeah, that ain't going to happen. It is 250 give or take megabytes per second pipe, and that's going to have to be leveraged against read and write at the same time. So that's really the hardware of the device. We've talked a lot more about the insides and the outside. I think it would be remiss not to talk a little bit more, at least about some of the ADM stuff. As I say, we will be fully covering the latest version of ADM running on this system and the 2-bay, along with some Plex stuff very, very soon. But ADM as a platform, it has to be said, has evolved substantially. I do think it's still not quite there with the likes of Synology's DSM and QNAP's QTS platform, which have very much grown to their respective markets. But I will say that ASUS Store's ADM platform is certainly one of the most evolved out there. So ADM for a start, let's look at backups. So internally, you've got the usual RAID stuff that we've already discussed, and of course there is support of snapshots, although again BTRFS is off the table there. There's a multi-tiered backup option within the system across a few different applications, but predominantly it means you can back up the contents of this NAS to another NAS, folder within folder NAS backups if you've got dual RAIDs running parallel. You can go ahead with NAS to the cloud with a multitude of cloud services in the third party available, not even just your general, throwaway Google Drive. We are talking the likes of AWS, we're talking Azure, we're talking blob storage, although they don't really support software as a service, SaaS, as some of the big boys do at the moment. It is general storage, bucket, backup, synchronization, nothing really multifaceted to do with the likes of Workspace, Google Workspace and Office 365 in a really integrated account way. Media handling on this device is still pretty good, with looks good, sounds good, and a couple of photo apps there. They don't have AI-powered photo recognition yet, although it's a little bit annoying that their app is called AI Photo. I get it, all of their apps start with AI, but again, it's really annoying they don't have AI inside. It's kind of missed the trick there. With the video stuff, of course, they do highlight Plex Media Server works on this, and we'll be checking that out. But the photo apps are still pretty good. We did a few mobile reviews recently, and the music and video apps for streaming across DLNA or even network remote sharing with on-the-fly or offline transcoding. Those options are all there for you. Synchronization between your client devices, so your mobile phones, your laptops and stuff. Easy Sync takes care of that, and you can create synchronized folders between those. So again, you can either have changes are reflective across both, or you can upload from one constantly and have one being a differential backup, or one just basically being the large style storage of everything you've synchronized from the local client hardware. Although I will highlight, you go down that road, then of course this thing stops being a backup. It starts being the only repository for that information. Please do not do that. That is not backing up. How terribly pious of me. On top of that, looking at my notes, of course, there is the Surveillance Center application. Now, surveillance on this device, again, it's one of those areas that I think ASUS Store do quite well, but I really think they could zhuzh it up a little bit with Synology Surveillance Station application being pretty darn good, and QNAP's QVR Pro really going their own in like almost AI forensic level way across the systems. Surveillance Center on the Asus Store platform and ADM is starting to look a little bit dated, and I think there's a bit more they could do with that. We did do some stuff on it a few months ago using the HDMI and KVM setup, but it's still pretty good. And the system has 4 licenses, but again, I'm not going to say it's the best out there. It's pretty good, and for what you're paying for this device, it is damn good, supporting up more than 20 cameras, but I still think they could do a little bit more with it, even on the system's got a bit more horsepower behind them. Then you've got container applications like Docker available for this. You can run those far more resource-friendly versions of apps in the third party. That includes Plex and more as containers with Docker on this system. But bear in mind, again, this is not a 64-bit x86 based processor. So virtualization and the likes of VirtualBox, you're not really going to get that on this. You can run kind of similar things with Docker, but to be honest, things like Linux VMs on this with this kind of architecture, I just wouldn't. And ultimately, for its intended audience as a budget solution, I think it ticks a lot of boxes and then some. Now, where this sits with regards to the non-pro versions and why Asus Store developed the DriveStor and then skewed it into a pro and non-pro version, that I'm less of a fan of, but this system as it stands and the hardware on paper, I like it, and I think it brings a lot of the more modern conventions of network attached storage readily available to the end user. I just wish that we saw greater evolutions within those individual apps within ADM. ADM itself in its newest version looks smoother, runs faster, and generally has a lot more back-end stuff that you don't see to be more responsive, which is always well and good. But I think a lot of people buy these systems for those killer apps, and I think Asus Store could stand to do a little bit more on that. But then, who knows what the future will hold. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, click like. If you want to learn more, not just about Asus Store, but NAS in general, click subscribe. And of course, take advantage of the free advice section over on NAS Compared. There's a link in the description. Head over there, learn what you need to learn about network attached storage and data storage in general, but take advantage of the free advice. And I do mean 100% free, no payment needed. There's like a donate button there, but that's optional. And if we do send you an affiliated link to something where we get a bit of a kickback for the site, we will let you know. But to be perfectly honest, we just want to help people. It's me and Eddie, the web guy. It's free advice. It might take us a day or two to respond. We are 2 human beings with lives, but we respond to every email. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.